Let's talk about how you know when it's time to do a rebrand because this is something that some people ask themselves randomly. Some people never ask themselves. And so you have the two different ends of the spectrum. Like some people are like, I'm tired of what I'm doing and let's just create a new brand. Like there's no rhyme or reason. It's like, let's just create a new logo and new colors. And then other times, like you really should have done it and you didn't
Mhm.
do it. So
Mhm.
how do we know? How do we know when we should do that?
Well, one of the cues that you should be looking for is if you've had a significant change in the services that you provide, then it may be time to rebrand the business or refresh the brand in the business because your brand should communicate not only who you are, but it also should speak to your audience and it should also align with the services that you provide. So if there's a significant change there, then you need to look at your current brand to see if it's still communicating that, is the messaging communicating your new services that you do, or is it still kind of outdated? So that's a good way to check whether or not you need to refresh the brand is are you communicating properly what you're providing, the services or products that you're providing?
Yeah. Yeah. I have a friend of mine. He used to have an IT company, and over over time, he decided that he wanted to do less of the IT type work and do more like building websites and things like that. His IT company offered those things, but he just kind of wanted to do more of that.
Mhm.
And that was an area in which he had to look at and say, okay, should we rebrand and change
Mhm.
our business name and things like that? Because even though he was still doing technology work, it was a significant shift in what his business was offering.
Right. So imagine you have visual designs that represent your brand that are more, say, for example, geared towards cybersecurity. Then those visuals are not going to be in alignment with services that you offer for website development.
Hmm.
So on one side, you want to communicate, the importance of managing risk and things like that versus another one, with website development, you're going to be communicating how to do digital communications and how to streamline the workflow and navigation for websites and things like that. So you're communicating two completely different messages.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's a good example there.
Yep. All right. So what's another thing that we should consider if we're thinking about whether we should rebrand or not?
If you have a major shift in your target audience, then
Mm.
that's definitely a cue. That's something that you want to look for. Um, to rebrand or refresh because your brand should connect with the audience. The whole purpose of brand versus marketing and that kind of thing is that it's a psychological connection to your target audience and your business. So how that audience thinks about your business is what branding is all about. Now, if that audience shifts, then are you going to still maintain that connection? So for example, if your target audience or the demographic that you're trying to target is an older demographic, and then all of a sudden you shift to a younger teenage demographic, well, the visuals are going to change significantly. You
Hmm.
may have more edgy graphics and edgy photos, and the types, the fonts, and the colors are going to shift because they're two completely different audiences. So you can't, it's not a one size fit all. It really isn't. So if your target audience shift, then that's definitely a good reason to refresh or even completely rebrand. I mean, even with us, we had to do that. So when we shifted from targeting and focusing on nonprofits and churches and things like that to professional service providers, that's a different look. That's a different audience. We're communicating differently. So our services may adjust a little bit, but it's the communication of what we're putting out visually, what we're saying. There's a different need there than what we had with the prior audience. So that's a good a good time to evaluate your current brand and whether or not you need to shift or, revise it or completely do a complete overhaul. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Well, I'm glad you brought up a couple of those points about branding because oftentimes people think about branding as being like your logo.
Mhm.
They don't often think of branding as being your voice and
Mhm.
what you're talking about, and specifically how you're talking about it is being your brand. So there's just so much more to branding or a brand than simply colors or fonts or logos. There's so much more to it than that. So I'm
Mhm.
glad you brought that piece up.
Yep, yep, that's important.
Hmm.
So, another one is if people are consistently confused about what you do, then it's time to evaluate your current brand. It may be time to refresh it or just do a complete rebrand.
Hmm.
Because when people visit your site, when they see your social media posts, when they look at the logo, when they look at your print materials and things like that, people should have a pretty good idea of what you do and the services that you provide. But if they're constantly asking you, what do you do again? So, what does that mean? And so, that's kind of my thing. When I don't understand something, I'm like, so what does that mean? So,
Yeah, I see a lot of those like on LinkedIn when you go in there and it's like I I do this for this group of people, and after I read it, I'm like I still have no earthly idea what you do.
yep,
Like it makes no sense what you just said. Um,
yep, yeah. So
and that
that's
to me that's a
important.
branding problem, because
Mhm.
whether it's a personal brand or whether it's the company brand, it's like okay, you used a lot of big words and smoke and mirrors,
Mhm.
but at the end of the day, I'm still confused. And so, who did it help? And it's nobody.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and I think about small business, and I say small, not meaning necessarily one or two employees. I mean even hundreds of employees. Small businesses. You, Oftentimes, I think we get it wrong in small business because we look at these big businesses and how crazy they name themselves. And then we think picking a name is not really a big deal
Mhm.
because you see Google and even Apple, like you named a technology company Apple. That says nothing about, as a matter of fact, you're talking about produce and
Mhm.
computers. And so you look at these brands like that and you're like, okay, I can just name it whatever I want. You can get away with it when you're pouring a ton of money into educating the public about what that brand is. But when you're not doing that, then you have to be a little more specific about what you're providing. And
Mhm.
that's why you'll often see people like John's Lawn Care Service.
Mhm.
It's like you put what you do in the title,
Mhm.
or, exclusive plastic surgery, clinics or
Mhm.
something. So you know what it is that they do. And that's usually a better fit, is to put that in the name of what you do, or at least have something that talks to what you do to some degree.
Yeah, and that goes back to the point of sometimes when you're starting out, you have this name, and then all of a sudden you start offering different services and things like that that don't quite align with the name. Then now you need to really think about that. Are we the same people that we were when we started? Or have we shifted and our business have shifted and now the whole brand needs to shift? Because where you start is not necessarily where you are going to be in the next 5 years, or where you are now is not where you were 5 years ago. And it's
Hmm.
time to really, reevaluate the entire brand. I see that it creates confusion when you say that you're one thing, and then the services that you provide don't really fit in that box. Then people are confused, like, wait a minute, I thought you
Hmm.
said that you were this, but you're offering these services. And you may say, well, I can do whatever I want. I can offer whatever services I want. And you can. But the problem is when it comes to your brand, you now have trust issues. Because if I hire someone who is a painter, for example, and then all of a sudden that painter's like, oh, I'll cut your grass too. I'm like, Wait a minute. So is painting your hobby, or is this, are you a professional service provider, or is this something you do on the side? It immediately waters down your credibility because now you're doing these things that are completely unrelated to the main thing that you said that you were. So you
Hmm.
have to really evaluate that. And is that messaging consistent across all platforms? Like what are you? Who are you? What services are you providing, and are you communicating that across all of your platforms?
Yeah. It's funny that we got a small store here in town. If you drive by and you look in the window, it says tuxedo rental and computer repair. You're like, what? I still don't get it, but
Yeah, yeah. So
and
imagine though, imagine that I own a business and I have a ton of computers,
mhm,
where I have, 100 or 200 computers that are a part of my business, and I need a computer repair company. I am not going to a tuxedo and computer repair company because I'm like, I need a real computer repair person.
yeah,
And that company might be good, but it's not communicating that you're not really serious about computer repairing. That's just something you do on the side. So it waters down your credibility. I don't trust you because it just doesn't fit. It doesn't make
yeah,
sense.
yeah. I could see their slogan being "Look good while you wait," something I don't know. But I used to see that often with things like pawn shops. Like it'd be pawn shops and jewelry repair or something, and it's
Yeah.
like, okay. Now I think it's more common now where you're like, okay, yeah, you can go to a pawn shop and get jewelry. They seem to over time that's meshed, but I do see sometimes where it's pawn shop and then something else completely unrelated, and it's
Yeah.
like,
And that's a
what?
brand nightmare for the branding agencies, branding companies like us. And you want us to create a design for that represents the business, and we're like, wait a minute, your business is schizophrenic, like it's two totally different things, and I have to come up with an image that represents both. Like, this is two different minds. How This is crazy. You need to tell us exactly who you are. I don't even know if you know who you are. So it becomes complicated because it's like you're talking about two totally different things. You got two different businesses in
Hmm.
the same building, and that's fine, but you need to split these things up because that's people aren't going to trust you. They're not going to trust the services that you provide. They're totally unrelated. So,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
we talked about big brands, and recently we've had some big brands do rebranding. Like you've
Mhm.
got Google, who, Google was a search engine. Google's way more than a search engine.
Yep.
And so now Google is Alphabet.
Mhm.
Now we still call it Google, but they rebranded. Now their
Mhm.
company is Alphabet. And then you have Facebook, who Facebook does a whole lot more than Facebook. A lot of people don't realize that,
Yep.
but their company is now Meta.
Yep.
It's not Facebook anymore.
Mhm.
So Facebook is a product of Meta, and
Mhm.
Google is a product of Alphabet. And so they've done this rebranding so that it answers the question of what is it that you do now, and
Yep.
it's different than it was when they first started.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, so those are good reasons to look to see if you need to refresh or to rebrand completely. So, just in review, if you have had significant change in the services that you provide, if there's a major shift in your audience, and if people are consistently confused about what you do, then it's time to review your brand to see if you need to rebrand completely or just tighten it up and refresh it.
Yeah. So what do you think as we wrap up here? What do you think about the folks that are saying, I'm just sick of looking at my own logo or looking at my own colors? I think it's just time to do a refresh. Like none of the other three things we talked about really exist. It's
Mm,
just they feel like they're tired of seeing
yeah, you have to remember that your brand is not about you, it's about
it.
your audience.
Right.
So what does your audience think? Are
Mm.
they, I mean, imagine if Coca-Cola said that. I'm tired of red. Like red is the thing. When you see red in a squiggly line, you have arrived at Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
And they've been red since the beginning. And so they have established that brand. If they kept changing colors every so often just because they were tired of looking at it, now they have to start all over to get people used to seeing that red. So it's really about your audience and the things that we talked about. Of course, you're going to get tired of looking at it because you look at it all the time. But your audience, remember that you're competing with their entire life. You're competing with animals and dogs and UPS and FedEx and Coca-Cola and Pepsi and Doritos and Nike and Under Armour and all of these different brands and things out there. You need something consistent. So every time you change, it's almost like starting all over again when it comes to those kind of things. So that's not a good reason. Not a
Yeah.
good reason.
Well, just remember your branding is something that you look at, but your clients look for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's important to keep it the same. I know when Kia changed their logo, I don't know if you recognize that happened over the past few years.
Yeah.
When they changed their logo, for the longest time, I was looking at that logo and I thought it was KN.
Yeah.
And I was like, who is this car brand?
I don't like the
KN.
rebrand. I like Kia. I like what it was. This new thing, I'm like, what is that? I can't even. That's like Ken. Like,
I
it's
know.
Kia.
I mean, I did. It took me forever to figure. I think I ended up having to Google it. Like, who is this car brand? And I'm like, oh, that's Kia. I didn't even recognize that was okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. And then again, this is one of those things like, why? Why did you rebrand?
Yeah.
Nothing changed.
Yeah.
But you just decided that you didn't like the logo.
Confusing everybody. Just confusing everybody.
It was confusing. Yeah, absolutely. So there you have it, folks. If you're thinking about whether or not you should rebrand, those are some questions that you should ask and ponder whether or not it makes sense for you. And if it does, then reach out to folks like us here at Pixel 13, and we can help you through that conversation, thought process, and see if that's something that you want to tackle. All right. We'll see you again next time.